Hey guys, I have here with me my good friend Frank Turek. I'm interviewing him today about his new book, Hollywood Heroes. This is a new book that he came out with his son, Zach Turek, who I had the pleasure of meeting a few years ago at CIA, which is Cross-Examine Instructor Academy. I highly recommend that you guys look into this. They have it every year. It's an absolute and total blast. You get to meet everybody and you learn a whole lot. And I had the pleasure of reading the entire book. And I want to ask Frank some questions about his book. The first thing I kind of want to ask you about is I'm sure a lot of my viewers are wondering this as well, with some of the controversy maybe that you've gotten from the book, particularly with Harry Potter. So right off the bat, I really want to ask you about that.
Well, we're about out of time. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen.
When did you get a soundboard?
Oh, come on. It's magic. Well, that can be scary. This is the magic button. Sorry, I had the.
You've been practicing. That's amazing.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. Well, our mutual friend, the great Jorge Gil, sets me up with all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. We got all sorts of stuff here, but
this is new. You've memorized this.
Yes.
I'm impressed.
I'm stalling now. Okay. Harry Potter. Yes. Harry Potter. First of all, the way this book came about was because my son, who's also a graduate of Southern Evangelical Seminary, where Melissa Doherty's going. I don't know if you know
I'm
that.
about to graduate myself. That's really
cool. He got his master's, although he's still in the Air Force. He got his master's there remotely, just like you're doing. And he's always been a movie buff. So several years ago, we got talking and we finally decided, well, there's so many parallels in these movies to the story of Jesus, the greatest story ever told. Why don't we put a book together that will show people these parallels? It'll be a good evangelism tool. It'll also be good. We could fold some apologetics in there, theology. It'll be a fun way of communicating apologetics, theology, and popular culture. So that's what we did. Now, how did Harry Potter get in there? But what about all the occult stuff in there? That's what people are going to say. Now, look, let me just say this. It's totally up to parents. I support parents. Whatever they think they want to do with their children in terms of what movies they see, what they not see, I support it, okay? But I think some Christians have a double standard when it comes to seeing the occult or wizardry in movies. Because the same Christians who have a problem with Harry Potter seem to have no problem with Lord of the Rings. I mean, Gandalf is a wizard, right? And no problem with the wizardry in the Chronicles of Narnia. J.K. Rowling is actually an Anglican, and she said the entire series can be summed up by two Bible verses which appear in the books and the movies. The first is the last enemy to be destroyed is death. That's from 1 Corinthians 15. And the other is where your heart, where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And she says, those two verses epitomize the entire series, but I didn't want to tell people about this because I didn't want people to know where we were going with the story. Now, the kind of wizardry that you see in Harry Potter generally is not the kind of occult that the Bible talks about, because the kind of wizardry you see in Harry Potter is completely invented out of the mind of J.K. Rowling. I mean, you can't, nobody can fly on broomsticks and play a modified soccer game. This is not something that happens. It's sort of like the Force in Star Wars, which we cover as well. Nobody can levitate a spaceship with their minds. This is fantasy. And so this isn't the kind of occult that the Bible talks about. It's just made up wizardry. And the reason Rowling put it in her story is because she said this kind of magic, which is invented, is the kind of power that a child could have, the only kind of power a child could have in my story, the ability to do magic, okay? But the magic isn't the heart of the story. The heart of the story is Harry Potter is the savior of the world. In fact, Harry Potter parallels, as we point out in the book Hollywood Heroes, by the way, the subtitle is How Your Favorite Movies Reveal God. Yeah. Harry Potter parallels Jesus in four distinct ways. Number one, he's prophesied before he is born to be the savior of that world. Secondly, he has to live a moral life in order to be that savior. Thirdly, he sacrifices himself to the Satan figure in the movie Voldemort, in the book as well. And then fourthly, he rises from the dead, and then his followers have to put their faith in him in order to finally defeat Voldemort. Now, does this sound familiar at all? I mean, this is the Christian story told in a fantasy way. So again, I support parents, whatever they want to do with stuff like this, but I think in many cases, Christians have a double standard. This kind of fantasy is not the kind of stuff the Bible's talking about anyway. It's complete fantasy. And we're fine with it when it comes to Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia. Why not the same with Harry Potter?
Yeah, and I think you're careful to depict the difference between the two. Like in every chapter, you're talking about the well, both you and Zach, you both talk about the parallels, but you're also very careful to show the distinctions.
Oh, sure.
Between them. And so, but yeah, what would you say to the viewers that are very uncomfortable with your opinion on that? Particularly those who do believe it's witchcraft and that should be avoided at all costs. Would you say to them that there's area for disagreement, but we can still love and come together? And
oh yeah, of course. That's why I say I support what parents think about this. But look, you couldn't watch virtually. Well, let me put it this way. Do you know out of the top 25 grossing movies of all time, 23 of them are fantasy movies? In other words, they have some component of the supernatural and/or paranormal in them. In fact, the only two I can think of that don't have that is Titanic and Furious 7, which is a driving movie basically. Every other movie in the top 25 of all time have fantasy in them. Why? Because this is what resonates with people, because we all want to be taken from this world of pain and suffering to a world where there will be no pain and suffering. And that's what these movies do for us. The superhero genres that we cover, as you know, Melissa, comprise 12 of those 25 movies. And the reason they resonate with us is because we want somebody to come take us to the promised land, get us out of this world of pain and suffering, take us to a place of bliss. And that's what these superhero movies do.
Now, bouncing off of that, springboarding, my absolute favorites in the book, right? There's a lot of characters. My favorites were Captain America, Lord of the Rings, and Wonder Woman. And again, admittedly, I haven't seen all the Marvel movies, but one thing you said in Captain America that really stuck out to me, and it's been resonating with me, and I've kind of been thinking on it and dwelling on it since I read it, is that you're talking about a person who dies to defend the people back at home who they don't even know, right? They're trying to protect their home, and it's an honorable thing to do. But then they do it out of love. Hold on. But then I wrote down the quote. Sorry. So, but then you want, what did I write? I think, hold on. How many people? Oh, yeah. I wrote down the exact quote, but it was talk to text. So yeah. But then what do you do when you went up to your enemies, right? You said, how many people do you know who would die for their enemies, right? Like you're talking about Thanos in the Marvel movies. Would they die for Thanos? And I thought that was a very interesting point. What superhero dies to save their enemies? None. And I think that's the essence of why you wrote the book.
Yeah, except Jesus. He's the ultimate hero.
Exactly. And that's what it's exactly what I'm getting at, is that that Jesus is the ultimate hero. And I'm wondering if you could expound upon that.
Right. Well, one of the reasons that these movies resonate with us is, let's go back to Endgame for a second, because you brought up Endgame, right?
Good movie.
Yeah, great movie. And at the end, spoiler alert.
Yeah, we're spoiling everything.
Iron Man does, look, if you haven't seen Endgame yet, where you been? Okay. He sacrifices himself to beat Thanos and save the world. Of course, he dies. But everyone looks at that and they're inspired by it, right? But imagine if he had done this instead, Melissa. Imagine if at the very climax point, Iron Man is there with his buddies, his Avengers, and he goes, you know what, guys? I just don't feel like trying to take Thanos out today. I tell you what, I need to get back to following my heart and taking care of just me. Okay, I'm out. Who would have said, wow, what a great film?
He's living his truth, though, Frank.
That's right.
Living his truth.
He's living his truth. He's following his heart. You'd go,
following his heart.
Come on, man. Even if you're an atheist, you're going to go, and you think there's no meaning to life, you're going to go, oh man, that was wrong. He should have done something there. Right. And then he goes, and of course he does sacrifice himself, but it just goes to show you that all truth is God's truth. And we live in a world, Melissa, where people are yearning for what Christianity has already provided. They're yearning for someone to come take us out of this world, to sacrifice themselves to save them. And the newsflash is he's already done that. He's just waiting for the full number of Gentiles to come in. And once that happens, then he's going to come back and complete the job. But the heavy lifting's already been done. It's already there. The sacrifice has already occurred. And so even filmmakers who don't have Christianity in mind know that they live in this world and know that they live in a world where people are yearning for what Christianity already promises.
Yeah, it's a really good point and a good parallel between, like, it's already in our hearts of what we want, like eternity stamped on our heart. And we can kind of see, we can, no matter what part of the world you're in, unprovoked and untainted from any other culture, we all want that. So I think that's a really interesting point. Yeah.
In fact, C.S. Lewis put it this way. Let me just read something from Lewis, because
Sure.
Lewis is so profound on this, and it's in the book Hollywood Heroes, where he says, we all have this desire for things that this world can't quite satisfy. So he says this: if we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. And I don't know about you, but you get those little glimpses of heaven when something happens in your life. For a split second, you go, there's bliss. I can see it, whether it's a beautiful sunset or a moment with your child or your spouse, or just something that transcends. You could hear music in a certain way, and you get that glimpse of transcendence. That's what Lewis is talking about. And we all want that, but we don't quite get it here. It's always it's just a little bit out of reach. And Lewis says maybe that's because we were made for another world.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense. It's a very famous quote from him. And speaking of Lewis, this is actually, he's involved in my next question for you. And I want you to expound upon this as well.
All right.
Now in the chapter about the Lord of the Rings, one of my favorite movies, this is a movie that I have watched many times, and The Hobbit, and the whole thing. And I read the books, and, but you say that people in the West have heard that the Christian story they've heard it so much that the familiarity with it breeds like a sort of apathy, which I underlined and I put a star next to it. I absolutely agree. Which again, I think is another reason why we use metaphors, right? We're trying to make it we're not trying to change it. We're trying to make it so that it's understandable, which again is something that Paul did do, which you talk about. There's a section in the book in this chapter where you're talking about something that I think a lot of people may misunderstand. And it's a conversation that C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were having together. And he's talking to Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, and he's like, or no, was it the other way around?
Tolkien talking to Lewis. Yeah.
Yes, it was Tolkien talking to Lewis. And he said, no, Jesus is the true myth. Can you tell me what that means?
Sure. Lewis was always enthralled with stories of dying and rising gods. They came after Christianity, but he would read them in pagan stories and go, wow, this is really inspiring. And Tolkien pointed out to him, Jack, that was what they called C.S. Lewis, Jack, you're enthralled with all these pagan stories about dying and rising gods, but you're not enthralled with it when you read it in the pages of the New Testament. Why is that?
Interesting.
And then Tolkien said, actually, you love those myths, but Christianity is the true myth, meaning it really happened. It's an historical fact that Jesus died and rose again. So the stories that you love that are false, you're enthralled with, you're enchanted with, but you're not enchanted with the true myth. And it was a light bulb that went off in Lewis's head. He researched it and he realized, Jesus did rise from the dead. And then he became the greatest apologist of the past, say, 100 years.
Don't you think that's really interesting, though, that that's the way he phrased it for him to understand?
Yeah.
Like a sentence.
Myth.
Yeah. And I think that that's kind of the point that I want people to kind of get from this, is that I think we can kind of live in our little boxes and try to avoid any sort of anything of the world. Right. But when you take these things and you put it in a way so that the ears can understand in their own language, so to speak. And I do this with Jehovah's Witnesses, right? So you can use their own language. Yeah. And I think we can do that successfully with anybody and any religion or belief system, because if we understand their worldview and how they see the world, then it's like we can see the chessboard, right? We can understand and really speak to them and be 10 times more effective because we have that language barrier isn't there. So Yeah, that was good. I really like that. And I wanted you to kind of explain a little bit more to the viewers what that would mean. And I have one more question for you. It's about my favorite chapter, Wonder Woman. I saw the
Hmm.
first Wonder Woman. I don't remember it very well.
Hmm.
But in particular, it was the second Wonder Woman that I thought was very interesting and rather ironic, because I was interested to know that Hollywood made a movie like this, which I know that every Christian isn't like, they don't agree with certain things, but I found it very interesting how, like, here she has her lasso of truth, right? And she's talking about the depravity of humanity, truth and love, and things like that. Very, very Christian concepts
Yep.
that are not woke.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In
Um,
fact,
yeah, keep
in
going.
the first movie, the one thing she says that's really intriguing, there's a part where the villain she's going up against, Ares, wants her to kill all humanity with him because humanity just does too much evil. And
Yeah.
so she is about to bring judgment down on the evil Dr. Maru. If you remember the plot, anyway, there's an evil person in there that made a whole bunch of gas to kill innocent people. And this woman is kneeling, this Dr. Maru is kneeling on the tarmac where this battle's going on, and she's unmasked. She had a mask on, it revealed her distorted face, and she's kneeling as if she's repenting. And Wonder Woman has this tank that she's about to throw down on this woman, and Ares is egging her on. She deserves to die.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously she's repentant there, this woman. And so Wonder Woman turns to Ares after Ares says, they don't deserve your protection.
Mm-hmm.
And Wonder Woman says, it's not about deserve, it's about what you believe. And I believe in love. She takes out Ares. And of course, the parallel here is that it's not about deserve. You're not forgiven because you deserve to be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
You are given forgiveness out of grace. You're given forgiveness out of love.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't get what we deserve when we trust in Jesus. We get what we don't deserve, grace. And when she says, I believe in love, this is a Christian concept that if you want love, if you want to be forgiven, you will be. If you don't, you won't be. You'll be separated. So, and then the movie you're talking about, the second movie, where Max Lord, what a great name for for a villain. Max Lord is kind of like a prosperity preacher where he's trying to get people to wish what they want, no matter what they want. And it just goes to the depravity of man. Well, it turns out through the plot that when more people wish what they want, the world falls apart, and it's ultimately about to go to nuclear war. And Wonder Woman convinces Max Lord, spoiler alert, she convinces Max Lord that he ought to follow the truth. Because the truth is important. Don't just follow what you want to do, follow the truth. And she doesn't even use any superpowers on him. Yeah. It's all about love and the truth. And he repents and saves the world. Now, you're not going to see Iron Man saying to Thanos, hey, repent. I love you, right? You're not going to see that. But Wonder Woman, her superpower is love and truth. And she doesn't follow her heart either in that movie, as you know, Melissa. Yeah. She has to give up the love of her life in order to save the world. She doesn't say, oh, I got to follow my heart. He's the love of my life. She says, no, I'm sorry. I got to let him go because this is the truth. This is the only way to save the world. And she does.
Yeah. And I think, again, I haven't seen the movie, but the way that you put it out, and because you tell the storyline and you give a little bit of the narrative. And I thought that it was so, I don't know, kind of gave me hope that maybe there's something that's not completely, totally irredeemable when it comes to the way that some Hollywood things function, right?
Yes.
That message, even though that was what, a few years, not even that long ago that movie
2020 came out Christmas 2020. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. So that was really recently in the middle of this political stuff that we're in. Right. And I think it's very interesting and ironic that they are saying these things that are antithetical to this movie. Like, so our culture is saying this, but this movie comes out talking about truth and love. And I don't know, it makes me hopeful that we're not all too far gone when it comes to that kind of concept.
Now,
And
you know what's gonna happen if they go too far the other way, where they try and make everything about political correctness. People are going to get turned off by it. I think it was Ben Shapiro who said, "Go woke and go broke."
yeah,
Right? I mean, people are there. They're there mostly for entertainment. They don't want to be lectured on how evil they are, how wrong they are based on this new standard of wokeness.
yeah,
They want to go there and they want the old-fashioned inspirational kind of movie, particularly in these superhero movies. That's what they're about, right? They're not
yeah,
about giving a message of wokeness. That's not gonna sell long term.
yeah,
And unfortunately, it seems like some of the theaters, or I should say, some of the studios, are going in that direction.
mhm,
I don't think it's going to work long term for them. You know, I could be wrong, but the movies that we cover in Hollywood Heroes are the movies that have enthralled audiences for the past 4 decades, from
yeah,
Star Wars, you know, right up to the, say, Endgame. Those are the movies that we cover. So they're pretty devoid of wokeness.
yeah. So I appeal to everybody, if you want to kind of get a taste of how, this looks like, how you can glean certain lessons from these movies, I highly recommend that you get Zach and Frank's book. Frank, where can they get a hold of this book?
Well, if they go to hollywoodheroesbook.com, hollywoodheroesbook.com,
Oh, it has its
there's,
own website.
oh yeah, there's a little video on, it's kind of a video trailer for
Oh,
the
good.
book.
Okay.
And it explains what's in the book, what the chapter's about. And this is a great book, particularly for parents and their kids, or youth pastors, for them as well, because here's a fun way to communicate biblical truths, biblical life lessons, even apologetics, without getting all preachy.
Great. Well, great. Thank you very much, guys. I will have a link in the description for you to find the book. If you have any questions, Frank, is there somewhere that my viewers can find you at?
Oh yeah, crossexamine.org, crossexamine with a D on the end of it.org. Check us out there. Check out our YouTube channel, 2 words, cross-examine. That's all linked from the website anyway. So
Yeah,
check
and
all
it will
that
be
out
in the
there.
description for everybody
That's
to
right.
find. And but yeah, Frank, thank you so much for coming on and talk with me about this. I really enjoyed this book. I got a lot of lessons. I love it when I read something and it stays with me. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you so much for your time on coming on today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Melissa.